Well, hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast, which happens to be coming from you live from Field Service Connect 2019 in Austin, Texas. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to be joined by Dion McCormick, no relation, who is our lead solutions engineer. If I am correct, Dion is going to be getting into a little bit of inline editing today, and if I'm not correct, I apologize. But he's also here to take your questions. So if you have questions, go ahead and type them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, I am. How am I coming through?
Coming through loud and clear, thanks. And I can see your screen.
Excellent, excellent. Actually, I think I was tuning in to see the impeachment hearings, so I think I've got the wrong date and time there. No, kidding. That stuff's boring. This is interesting stuff. So thank you everybody for joining us for our weekly Q&A. And that is the key to this, is that it is a weekly Q&A. So if you take a moment, if you have questions, go to the questions portion of your GoToWebinar control panel and put your questions in there. Dave will be reviewing them along with our esteemed colleague, Sarah, who's online with us. We'll be trying to get to as many of those and answering as many of those questions as possible. As Dave mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and continue discussing the newest feature set called inline editing for the list control. It is the last pillar for the grid control, meaning the last key feature that was supported by the grid but wasn't really supported by the list control. That's a thing of the past. And so it really allows us to replace all the use cases with grids with the list control, and beyond that, gain all the enormous benefit of those tools. We have a couple other announcements before we start that. First and foremost, wanted to go ahead and let me go ahead and operate there. Wanted to let you know that we have a new official release that was released yesterday morning. The release is, again, 12th of November. I'm going to go ahead and let me go ahead and copy this here, and I'll go down to the chat window and paste the official location for that. And this is official release, so it has been, we are looking forward to having everybody kind of check it out. It includes what I'm talking about today, which was starting last week. It was a pre-release feature, but now inline editing is actually part of the release process. And I also have some updates in terms of some things we talked about last week. But again, that's the download for the new official Alpha Anywhere update. It includes all the massive changes in the last few months, which include inline editing, and also includes things like improved UX saving performance, publishing improvements. There's just a whole range of capabilities that were in there. And in fact, you can go in here and click View Release Notes. And in the release notes, it's going to have all of the different fabulous features that are in here. Things like the new weather control, which is really cool when you're doing dashboards. All of the inline editing aspects there. But there's a lot of other really cool stuff that's in there, including one that we're going to cover. I'm hoping to cover it next week, and I'm very excited about this one. This one kind of got tucked in pretty quickly just a little while ago, but in the control bar component, one of the key things you wanted to do was create a drop-down menu in your control bar, so as a navigation tool. And there were definitely methods to do it, actually some improved methods with things like injectable content. But we realized that almost everybody needed a more rich menu capability in the control bar. And so the team actually went back and integrated that rich capability into the control bar, so you can actually design very powerful menus and data-driven menus in the control bar component without a lot of effort. It really is really slick. And if you want to, you can go watch the video here to kind of get a jump on things, but we're going to explore that a little bit more because the control bar is such a powerful control, and the ability to put menus in it now is just fabulous. Plus, there's a lot of little other stuff in here. They've kind of modified some of the user interface elements to make them simpler. The Twilio updates, as you can see, you can walk right through and see all of the incredible capabilities. And again, the way I got there was I was at the Alpha Anywhere update and I clicked View Release Notes, and that allows you to check that out. So congratulations. Oh, by the way, just for folks who are a little bit newer, you'll see there's a series of links up here and then a series of links down here. These are patches. So if you've already installed the Alpha Anywhere, the app server IS, all you have to do is click these and it will do a patch to the existing solution. But if you are starting with a fresh machine or want to do a fresh install, the area down here below allows you to do a full install. And as we always tell you, if you're going to upgrade, do both the development environment and your server environment at the same time. If you, for instance, download and put in the development environment and then you publish to an older version of the application server, it's like from Hotel Transylvania, bad things are coming your way. Just because there's a lot of assumptions of the code that's available in the server when you publish from the latest version. So stay in sync. Make sure that if you download and update your development environment, you do so also with the server environment where you plan on publishing. That way you won't experience any strange things, downtime, etc. And I learned that the hard way a number of years ago. I was like, why is this report not running? And I did everything, double checked it. And it turned out I had upgraded my development environment and had not upgraded my server. And the updated report capability needed something on that server that wasn't there. And it was just, I lost hours, which it was my mistake. So we're hoping you don't make the same mistake by keeping everything in sync. So with that, we're going to jump back here real quick as we've been talking about the list control, and we're going to focus on the grid data editing. Specifically, the grid has had a lot of capabilities for a long time as a very rich control, very heavy control, and it had the ability for you to do inline editing of data, which people really liked. It made for a very efficient spreadsheet-like interface for people. And then also so the team said, hey, that was one of the missing links or components of the list control. The list control has all these incredible, powerful capabilities. Things like we've talked before, the ability to present a list control as freeform for mobile solutions, or a list control as a Kanban to do Kanban type interfaces, which we've covered in detail. And also just you have incredible flexibility with the list control that you don't have with the grid, especially in terms of formatting, layout, and having multiple layouts. That's one of the most exciting things about it. There's two things that are really cool is that, and we've kind of touched on it, is that a list control can actually have multiple layouts in a list control. So you can have at the same time, not displaying them at the same time, but you can show a grid-like interface, a mobile-like interface. You can also show Kanban and other things. So, and you can flip back and forth between them programmatically. So it really allows you to do some very fancy, very cool things with the list control. And beyond that, the other feature that is built into the list control is the ability to dynamically show, hide columns, resize columns. So again, you're moving towards more of a spreadsheet-like interface. And what was missing was inline editing, and now we're there. So I'm gonna dive into that a little bit more today. We're gonna cover today the ability to do other kind of controls in inline editing, meaning you can create rich editing experiences within the list. So as I go through this, please, we love your questions. Take the time to go to the Q&A section of the GoToWebinar control panel. Put your questions in there. Our esteemed colleagues will be watching that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump back over to my development environment. And I'm going to go ahead and bring in my last week's and show you again. Let's see, I think it's this one we were doing there last week there. So yeah, because we could show some other things here. So as we demonstrated last week was the ability for you to turn on inline editing and the detail view so that it would allow you to go ahead and edit data. So you can go in and by adding a set of controls and enabling certain features, you can either double click on a row and start editing it, and you can cancel out here, or you can click a icon and edit that record there. And once it's edited and saved, it uses all the power of offline editing to be able to do synchronization, meaning that I've edited this data locally on my machine here, but it's not synchronized. So what's great is list inline editing is going to work great for your mobile disconnected solutions. So you never have to worry about that. So now I can click synchronize, and everything went smooth. It went ahead and called the database, compared the information. It also handles conflict tracking, etc., and it stores this data in there. Now, before I dump, and the other things we kind of showed real quick was the ability for you to, and I think I did, I turned it on here where you can resize rows and do fun things like that. So you can set resizable on it, and you can also do show hide lists. So you can say, oh, I don't want these items there. I also would rather have contact be right there. You can see that the list really creates a very dynamic interface that your customers are going to like, that, to be honest, would have been extremely hard to do in a grid. It's sort of like there were certain things that were easy to do in a grid, but now all of that's in the list control. And there are things that were very hard in a grid that are now just built into there, including the ability to jump between different views of the list control. So I can go into more of a mobile view, and you can see it has a higher density here. I can go back to my kind of grid interface here. I can do all the show hide. All of that works great. So if I go ahead and show these things and go back to my mobile, you'll see, oh, let's see, yep. Oh, that doesn't, I have to show hide in this one here. It's kind of tracking it from there. So the other thing that was important that someone asked about, which I appreciate, was that they wanted the ability, once I've edited, so if I go in here, let's go ahead and go here, and I'll go up here to Marie Anders. I'm going to edit that right now, and I'm going to click save. And you'll notice I have to click synchronize. And so it's like, well, I don't want to have the user have to do the synchronize every time. So we went in, and inside the list control, I went to the detail view and went to the synchronization policy. So again, I went in the list control, detail view, synchronization policy, and you turned on these elements here. And I am not on the production release, but it turned out the reason that auto sync wasn't working because there was a little glitch. So we got the answer is that in the production release now, it will auto sync if you have this enabled. It just so happened I was still on a pre-release that didn't that had a defect in it, and so wasn't able to do there. So the cool thing is you can actually have the person edit something inline, click save, and boom, it's going to save it locally, and then it's immediately going to attempt to do a sync to the back end. If everything goes, you're done. If not, it will give you a notice. You can address the problems and everything else using the regular inline or the regular list syncing capabilities there. So again, one of the key questions was, well, how do I do how do I do this automatically? You only have to go into the detail view, go to the perform, enable that, and boom, now it'll do that auto sync for you. Again, I'm still running on my pre-release, so that's why you saw it did not auto sync when I did that process there. So very fun, very cool, and it allows you to do very powerful things. Now, as we've seen right now, the list control is pretty standard, meaning right now, if I click and edit this, I can edit this. You'll notice that these are all text fields. And so each of these is a text field. But let's say I want to have a drop-down box or a different type of control. Well, that's really straightforward, and it's built into this solution. So I'm going to go ahead and save a copy of this list or this control because I want to, this one works. I know what it is. I want to do some experimentation. By the way, remember, Alpha saves a version every time you make a modification, so you always recover it. But sometimes I'll go up here and say, you know what, I'm going to make a new copy of this control. So I'm going to do the Save As button, and I'm just going to call it List Inline Editing, and we'll just call this, there we go, V2. Okay. So now I've made a copy of it, so I can go to my heart's desire, and then if everything good, I just rename it back in the game. So what I want to do here is I'm going to go into my list control. And right now what we're doing is we're doing a pull from a backend data source. You can see that we're pulling customer ID, company name, contact, title, etc. I don't have to show all of those. List controls allow you to pull as much as you want and then filter it, etc. The user, you can then again use the layouts to be able to modify what they can see and what they can address. But city right now, what I'd like to do is city, I don't like it being a a write-in. So I want to make it a drop-down so it's easy for the person to understand. So if I go here to fields, these you'll see are my different fields here. And then if I click on city here, if you look over here and look down here to the in-place editing properties, when I enabled in-place editing, and remember, the way you do that is right here on the list properties tab. You go there first, you enable that, And that turns on all the in-place editing capabilities, because you may not want people to do in-place editing. It may be a read-only, or you may be doing a detail view to handle it. It's really up to you. And there's some really fun stuff coming down the road on that also. We'll be showing a little bit later this year. But the cool thing about this is that once I've enabled that, I can go back to my fields, and then I can determine, I'm going to go ahead and scroll this down so we see it a little bit more. We'll see right here that we have a control type, and we have a list of different types of controls. So text area, in case you're doing like comments or more detail there. Drop down, which is what I'm going to show you in a moment. But we also have edit combo and auto suggest, which if people are familiar with the lookup capability, this is very similar. They're going to be able to migrate to it very, very easily there. And another very important one, which is called date picker, which will then expose and show a calendar-like selection interface for a field. So a lot of the capabilities you have in terms of the different field types are built into it. And down the road, we anticipate having more now. I think there was a question about being able to do a star control in there. And at this time, not really. We kind of have a base set of controls. They're sort of that 90% of everybody needs to do with these controls. But the team is working heavily on ways to make it easier to include your own sort of editing metaphors into the capability, because it just expands your ability to use the tool in many different ways. So today what I'd like to do is I'm going to go ahead and select drop down, since this is a drop down. And similar to when I'm doing a UX or a grid, you'll see there's control settings. So now that I've set drop down, I can click the ellipsis button next to control settings, and this opens up mine. And so actually you'll see, oh, interesting, I kind of didn't notice that, but you can see we actually have more than that. We have logical checkbox, and radio button. So I apologize. I noticed here, let me do there, maybe I didn't go down far enough. Nope. So interesting, the drop down only shows these values, but if you go actually into the control settings, which allows you to edit, oops, sorry. There we go, drop down, then I go here. You'll see that we have a wider range. So for instance, you can do logical checkbox and yes, no. You could also do a checkbox with multiple values, radio button. So we've already started expanding those default ones. And again, these for our 90% of the people, this is going to satisfy that requirement, but we're working on it there. So now that I have drop down control type up top, I can determine how I want to populate that drop down. Now the default is static, so I just go in here and say, A, B, C, but that's kind of a pain, and you want this to be a dynamic system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually click here, and you can see we have dynamic in JavaScript. JavaScript's kind of cool, and you'll see some stuff that we're working on. Sometimes you're going to have local data on that device. Let's say it's a mobile phone. Well, with JavaScript, you'll be able to populate this on the fly using that technology. So it's pretty cool. It really expands sort of the mobile realm. But a lot of times it's really, well, I know I'm online, I'm on a web browser, so I'm just going to use dynamic. So now we've selected dynamic, it gives you the different types that are available. So as you can see, there's two ways to populate this, either a database query, which is again what most people will use there, but you'll see there's also custom, which actually allows you to define an Xbasic command to go and populate that dropdown. And that one is really powerful. I'll probably do a demonstration of it because it is so powerful. What it does is it allows you on the fly to be able to adjust what is shown to the person. So a database query is going to kind of query and load up based on a database query. It works great, and I'm going to show you that in a few moments. But sometimes you have more complex interactions saying, well, if the person's already done this to the row, or if these settings are in the row, I kind of want to limit what they can do on this dropdown. Those kind of sort of corner cases are easily handled by this custom, because the custom allows you to basically write a little script that says, oh, okay, in this case, I want to give you back these potential choices. Pretty neat. And that custom could be an API call. I mean, there's many things you could do with it, but I'm going to stick to database query right now. So I'm going to select my connection string, and I can have one or many that are associated with it. I'm then going to build my SQL selection. So I'm just going to go here. I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what, I want to go ahead and just look in the current customers table. You probably would have a cities table to standardize that, but I'm just going to go ahead and grab the city. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and use the name of the city. It's not like a foreign key relationship kind of scenario here. So, and we're going to cover that. I think I anticipate a question coming, which is, well, what if you have a foreign key in your list? How do you handle that? Kind of where behind the scenes you have like a number and then you have another table that has that number in that description. I'm going to come back and show that in a future session on inline editing, because that's a very common situation, and we'll show you that. But this one's simple. It's basically, there's this names of cities, and I'm just going to use those names. It could be codes and things like that. Now I can set some with properties. Now, the other thing that's kind of cool too is I have a full event model here that says after someone does something in here, then I can capture those in event and trigger things. So like, for instance, let's say the person selected something from a drop-down box and I wanted to change another field, then you could trap the on change event and write your own little script to do it. So very, very flexible in terms of being able to handle those kind of interesting scenarios where someone makes a change and you want to be able to make a modification on the fly. So we'll leave that for now though, and I'll go ahead and close this out. So now I've got my drop-down control type for city. My control settings are there. And you know what, my list layout here, I haven't touched it. I'm just gonna leave it alone. I'm just changing the control type and I'm letting Alpha do the work for me. So I've saved it. I'm gonna go into working preview. So same as we've seen before. Now I'm gonna go ahead and edit Alpha key. And you'll notice now over here under the city, it's got a drop-down box. And you'll notice that it dynamically populated all the different available cities from this table, so I can select the one from there. So as you can see, I basically just told it how I wanted to have that control be populated, and Alpha did the rest for me. Very, very powerful, very simple to use. And again, we have a wide range of controls. You can use that. Actually, let me go ahead and show one other one that I think is a very popular and a very powerful implementation. So I'm gonna go back into my list of customers. Remember, I'm gonna go to my fields. Once I've set up my inline editing, it's there. I'm gonna go here from dropdown, and I'm gonna actually change that to edit combo. And I'm gonna go into here, and in my case, again, it clears out the settings because I've changed it from dropdown, and you notice it kind of remembers it, so it's kind of nice about that. But I'm gonna go edit combo. I'm going to do a dynamic, and then I'm gonna go ahead and go to database. I'm gonna set the connection here. I'm gonna set the table name, and I'm gonna look up in customers. I'm going to display the city, and I'm going to return also the city. Now, what's kind of cool is if I wanted to, and I'm gonna require the person to pick from the pick list right here. And there's different ways to load it. There's a full suite of changes that allow you. So very straightforward from there. So I'm gonna go ahead and select that, click OK for that, click OK, do a save, and let's kind of compare the difference between what we saw before. I kind of really like this one, especially for desktop web solutions. Very, very handy, very powerful from that standpoint here. Oh no, there we go, we went behind, okay. So I'm gonna go back here, I'm gonna select this. So now I've still got my drop-down capability here, but what you can do kind of cool is I can sit there and say London, and London, Egan's, there we go. And, oh, it's the auto-suggest. Oh, so same, sorry, meant to show you the auto-suggest, my apologies. Let me go fix that real quick. It's very similar to what I did. City, edit combo, auto-suggest. I guess you have to go through this real quick, but no big deal. Use it a fair amount. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. Now let me save this and show you that. Okay, and it's coming up. And we'll go ahead and edit this. And now I can start typing in London, and notice as I start typing in, it does the classic searching based on the string, and I can say, oh, LI, it does that. And you can see it's very snappy. It's like very real time from there. So I can go Berlin, and then I can select Berlin, and boom, I've got it in there. So really handy. Again, you can, these experience that people had and you had with building grids can be applied to this capability here. So there's one other topic I want to cover real quick, and I'll go ahead and synchronize that to keep it up to date, is validation. It's something that comes up very often. So I just want to do a quick discussion on validation. The idea is I'm editing this data, so I need to be able to validate that data as the person is entering it, or I would like to be able to do that. So I'm going to go back into the design environment, go into my list of customers, go to my fields, and I'm going to select my city right here. And you'll see that if I scroll down a little bit here, we have something called validation. So we set our in-place editing properties, meaning what is my auto suggest, what's my control settings, how do I want to display that information to the person? But I have built in here validation. Now, the way this works is a little differently from the UX control, meaning that you can write a little, it's done through JavaScript. Again, the reason this is this way is primarily because when you're working on a mobile device, you're disconnected, you need to be able to do all that locally from there, but you can create very complex sort of scenarios here. So this gives you an example where you can say, okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and copy this real quick right here. I'm gonna paste it right here, and we're doing city, and the important thing is you need to use the same case. So I'm gonna go in here, and I'm gonna go city. Okay, so very straightforward. This is in the case saying, hey, if the new data city is equal to this, then return, is equal to empty, then tell the person it's required, else return blank. So this allows you to do that there. Now, very important on that, what's cool about this is you can create very complex kind of scenarios where you can say, hey, if city is this and county is this and this and this, you can look at all these variables at the same time and be able to handle it. It's very, very handy to create a little bit more fancy stuff. And so we can go in there, and let's give it a whirl here. We'll save that. And we'll do a working preview. So I'll go ahead and edit. I'm picking on Alf key today. So I'll tab out of it. And you'll notice very nicely when I attempted to save it, it says city is required. So it will not let me save this unless my validation rule is, and notice it looks nice. It puts a little red below that. You can customize all those pieces there, saying, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and fix it. I should have put in Berlin, Italy, and then I can synchronize it from there. So it does have the ability to do validation on the inline while you're editing it there, and has a nice little message there. And so you can go in here and see this information here. A lot of other things are built into it, which we can talk a little bit more, as you can have inline styles for these controls. You can have conditional styles, which is really cool. A lot of functionality, all this kind of inherited from the list control, but now available with this. So with that, that kind of covers the list control demonstration I want to do for today. We're going to dive into some other subjects. I got another session planned for it, but I don't want to overload it, and I want to leave time for your questions and other items from there. So again, a quick recap, we focused on the ability to use other types of controls. We kind of did a refresh on inline editing in general, and we also showed that you're able to do validation of data in the inline editing process, so that it's very simple for you to make sure that people are entering correct data in the system. And you have a lot of flexibility to do the JavaScript to do it any way you want in terms of how you perform that. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it back to, and see if we have any questions.
Questions. We do, in fact, have a few, but not a lot. So there's time to definitely enter in a few more if you want to get to your questions.
We don't want any slackers on this now.
No slackers. That's exactly right. Okay, so the first question we have has to do with those that dynamic pick list, or the auto suggest when you start typing in the city name. The question is, what happens if you're offline? Is this an online only feature? And if it is an online only feature, Is there some sort of error or something that the user might receive if they're using this on, say, a mobile device when it's disconnected? Is there a way to trap for that?
Very good point. Now, if you're using the dynamic capability for like a drop down or other pieces like that, if you're using the dynamic, then you're online. So you there's not really an error. They won't return any data because it's going to fail trying to contact the back-end server and get that information, because it's really just running a query against your database saying, hey, go get this information here. Now, that said, you can use JavaScript. And one of the powerful aspects of JavaScript is that you are able to then, in JavaScript, and I'll go ahead and just change it to JavaScript real quick to show you there. Now with JavaScript, basically you write a little JavaScript function, but we have the ability, we have some very powerful component methodologies, since a list isn't a control it, which is the client-side data cache. So basically how you can populate that drop-down list is the following: is you can create a client-side data cache. And what a client-side data cache does is it basically, in the UX, you say, hey, when you load yourself up, go grab this information and store it with the UX so that when the person is offline, this data cache information is available. And then what you can do is, in this JavaScript function, you can actually say, you know what, give me this information. You'll see it says dialog object, read data from cache items, and then you can create your own little cache items. There's a little more work to set that up, but once you've set that up, then that dropdown is always going to be done from the client-side data cache. And what's nice is that since it is on the device and local, the refresh rate is essentially instantaneous. It's just boom, the new data is being shown. So if you really are looking at the requirement to be able to be offline, the dynamic works well, but you could explore this to make sure it's happening there. We're actually working on some enhancements to the overall client-side data cache concept to further make it easier for the developers to provide that kind of resource, because there's a lot of demand for people to take a whole bunch of secondary data. I call it secondary data, but it's like, if you look at any design, you have your primary tables, then you have a bunch of secondary tables with like cities, counties, lookup code, product tables, et cetera, that are needed for whatever core process you're doing. So, you can either do dynamic if you're online, or you can use this client-side data cache. And then there's other things you can do. You can, for instance, even create a SQLite database on the fly and include it there. I mean, Alpha has a number of different ways, but we're working on making that simpler and simpler so that a developer can just say, you know what, I want this data to be available on my local device, and I want my fields to use that data, end of story, which is really where we want to go. And there's some really neat stuff that's being done around that we'll be showing fairly soon, so we're excited on there. So to make sure, if you really are like, well, these people may be using it offline, you can either warn the person before they even start editing, because there are built-in, like if I go ahead and go here, there is servers available. So you could actually run this before they even get to the list control to make sure they'll be able to use the list control. Or secondarily, you could use client-side data caches to do your offline data management. And what you can do is, when they're online, you just refresh that cache, and if they go offline, they're good to go. So there's a little bit more overhead management, but it's not too bad from there. So those are the two strategies I would look at in terms of, if you think, well, these people are going to maybe use it online or offline, then you kind of want to make sure you're covered on both bases. You warn the user, well, you can view data and review data, but we really can't do updates at this moment. Wait till you're either connected or Wi-Fi. And the other thing about that is, and this is very so anyway, and then the other option is to use the client-side data cache to perform the actual loading of that data from local data versus the other. So those, I think, would be the two ways to look at that.
That's terrific. Thanks very much. Another question here. You showed an example in which you went to save the field and a validation message appeared saying the city is blank. Is it possible to set up the validation so that it happens when the user simply exits the field?
Yes, you can. And the way you can do that is via the on change event. So let's go ahead and see how that works. I'm just going to go in here and be a very, hello. Okay, so again, the same information is available. the new data, the old data, all the information that you need to be able to write a little bit of script there. But I'm just going to fire this automatically saying on change, just do the alert. So I'll go ahead and close that. Okay. I save often. Go to my working preview. I did that on city, so I'll have to make sure to go back to city. So I'll go ahead and edit this city right here. And you notice when I basically started typing on there and then I tabbed out of it, well, that triggered the on change event, meaning it said, oh, they had changed the city. And so therefore it triggered that there. So you could trap that and do your own error checking. Now, the tricky part will be, well, where are you going to display the information? Well, you could write a little error message up here. I mean, you have all the ability. Like for instance, let's make that a little bit more interesting. So let's see. So let's go ahead and go to fields. Let's go to the city. Let's go to the control settings, and we'll go down here. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And instead, I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to create a new action. I'm going to call it dynamic error, just for the giggles. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a action JavaScript. So I'll do a transient message like those. Oops, wrong one. Add new action, transient message here. I'll go, whoa, pal. Okay. And you know what? To make it very obvious, I'm going to put it right in the middle of the screen. So I'm going to do center. If you haven't played with that, I love it. Okay. So I'm going to copy the JavaScript code here for that. I'm going to paste it here. So I'm going to force that no matter what the person puts in, but you could almost obviously do that if the person only created some kind of error condition. So let's go ahead and try this again. And I'll go ahead and edit this. I'll go ahead and change it. I will tab out and you'll see right here, it says, whoa, pal. And you see a little message there and then it goes away. So there's a lot of different ways you can display. There's an error there, and possibly even changing the color of this field is possible. I mean, haven't done it myself, but everything is possible because you have a hook to the object and you can do all those kind of pieces there. And as you can see, this is the version 1.0 of the inline editing. It's very rich and capable, but as over time, we're going to be adding a lot more capabilities to it to enhance things like error trapping and stuff. But you can kind of roll your own with the on change event very easily and have different ways you can to modify that data. So like, I'll go in there and change it a little bit more, and then the error comes right up here. It could obviously bigger. It could have like, in these transient messages, you could put like an error little icon, a lot of fun stuff you can do with that. And I use that control a lot because it's a very subtle, easy to use control.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Just a quick question. Back on one of the other screens that you were at, when you were choosing the dynamic option for a field type, there was a drop-down that said dynamic type. We're just wondering what that option was about.
Oh man, everybody's got their eagle eyes on there.
Uh-huh.
I know. So we have control type.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and go in there. And so we have text box, text error, drop, edit. Let's see.
And there's dynamic type, which you have right now set to database query. If you move your mouse up about, oh, yep, almost there. There you go. Oh, those are your options right there.
Yeah, so dynamic means database,
Right.
database query. Static is just a static set of data, and then JavaScript we talked about where you can on the fly generate that information and use, say, the client-side data cache or other technologies like that.
Mm-hmm. Great, terrific. Now, with the show hide list columns, how do you remove an item that you don't want the end user to hide, such as the in-place edit icons?
Ooh, that's a good question. I will have to do a little research on that. On the top of my head, let's go ahead and go here. So let's go actually. So we have a different control here.
Mm-hmm.
So let's column selector. That's the list selector. So we have this here, and let's see, wait here. Oh, it's built into that. So maybe it's, I'm gonna have to do some research. Off the top of my head, let me go find list layout. I don't know. Yep, I don't know. I'll have to do some research. I'm taking a note on that.
Okay, great.
Huh?
We will get back to you. So here's a question, and I did not set this up. This is not a plant question. It said they saw on the screen that transform was one of the data types. Can you explain what that is?
Oh yeah. It's a fun capability. Basically, the bottom line is when you're at data source here, and they're talking about right here transform. You can actually just put in your API code and a form definition on transform, and it will actually connect to transform and show a list of forms. So you know what, if you give me a moment, I can show you a real quick example. So bear with me real quick because I got to pull something out real quick. Okay,
All right.
so I'm just going to grab my API key and stuff like that. So transform API so I can show you. API. There we go. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. And back. Okay. We'll go back there. And we can restart. So I'll just go ahead. I'm just going to create a new control, UX control. And we'll make it simple. I always like to go in here first in my controls and add panel card just so I can. Then I'll go up here there and click data controls, list control, list transform. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell it to fill a container. So when we show all the information, it's nice. So I go into list transform now, and now I can select transform as my item here. And then I paste in my API key. I guess you're going to see it. So don't try it. I'll be changing it right after here. So paste it. Oh, no, good. Never mind. Foiled again. Okay, so I got my transform API key, and it's very important is that you need to do that on Transform Central. So before you start down this road, go to your Transform account, go to the home page and go to the developer options, and you'll see something on the left-hand side called API keys, and then it will generate an API key. And what's kind of cool about that is that you can actually generate an API key with certain limits in terms of what you can do within the system. So once you've got that API key, you can jot it down, you come here. So now that I do that, when I click here, it actually calls Transform, and here are all my different forms that I've been doing. I've been very busy, Dave, as you can see. I've got a lot of
Wow,
different
fast.
forms because
All
they're
right.
just so darn easy. I mean, when I get bored, I do it and put it in there. So I'll go ahead and grab the All Things Scottish. That's one of my favorite forms, All Things Scottish. Because, you know, if it's not Scottish, it's
Yeah, it is. It's not.
crap.
Yeah, it
If
is.
it's not Scottish, it's crap. So
Mhm.
now it's going to ask me the return type. And so, oops, I did that. The next one is, so I can either do a field or expression. I want to return a field in this case here. So I'm going to go ahead and return field 1, and I'm going to go ahead and get there. The return field is like the primary key there. And then I'm also going to click here where it says get form definition. I'm going to show you why in a few moments. Very, very important. And then I can paginate the data. So if I have a ton of forms, I can go ahead and put in paginate it there. So now that I've done that, guess what? This works just like a list control. So you can see here are my different fields. I didn't do a good job of naming them, bad Dion. But you'll also see kind of interesting is there's a lot of metadata that's available too. So you
Mhm.
can see, you know, if the form still has errors, all this, which could be really powerful for different reasons. So now I'll go to list layout, and I'll go ahead and add these lists right here and click OK. Save this, and we'll go list transform. And boom, now what it's going to do is instead of reading a database, it's actually going to make a dynamic API call to Alpha Transform, and it's going to grab mine. And did I not bring it back? Oh, I wonder if I don't have any fields on that. Should have them in there. I wonder if I've been playing with it. I might have deleted. I thought my all things gosh. Well, let's just go ahead and I'll do, I'm pretty sure boiler time. Okay. Return field type. Go ahead and go there. It's going to just be all dynamic. There we go. So I've got a few fields here. Oh, I'll do boiler ID is the one I want for there. Get that. Now, if I go to my fields, you'll see it's refreshed my fields to a different set of fields. So I can go to my list layout, get rid of those. And I'll grab a series here, move them over here, and click OK, save that. And now we should have some data that's associated with this. So if I haven't screwed up my transform account, oh, you know, I wonder if it's going to the API. Yeah, you know what? I've been playing with this. So I apologize. A little theater of the mind is that I've been doing a lot of work with the beta version of Transform. So I think I've moved my forms over to the beta form.
Place. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So my apologies, but it basically just shows this list, and then everything else you do in here can be done. It now the important thing, and we'll come back and do a little better demonstration, is there's another very cool form or tool that you can get, which is called the Transform Data Viewer. And what that allows you to do is you can put it, think of it as a detail view from this, a read-only detail view, where what you can do is on your user interface, you can put it on your user interface, tie it to the transform list, and it will show you the information that's in your transform. And what's really cool about that, basically, so you can click on a row and it would actually show you the detail for that transform form. And one of the cool things about that, which is really neat, is that if it's a map, it shows a little map. If it's a signature, it shows a little signature. So it actually renders it so you can see it without having to do it, and you don't have to do any work at all. It's very, very handy. So if you're just doing your own kind of viewer on the transform data, and that's a combination of the list that's connected to transform and the transform data viewer that's available from there. So we'll come back and show a little bit, you know, next week I'll come back and do a quick demo with some real data, get my issue cleared up there. But it really makes it easy for you to extend, because now in Alpha, you can create dashboards, you can create other methodologies that you're used to just using the standard Alpha skill set to interact with the data on Transform. So you have the power of building these very powerful, easy to create forms on Transform, get them out in the field, but then when you want to use that information, you can then basically use Alpha with this technology to connect to it. It's really fun, really easy. Sorry that it's not pulling back the data. It's because of my fun times. I gotta go to more stability on that. But I'll show you so you can see an actual real running example next time around.
Sounds great. Thanks very much. Here's a question. So in a list, the list that you showed, and we're showing lots of different data, if the key field is one of the things that's being shown, the ID field for the database, the primary key, how can you set that up so that the user can't change that? Like, for example, let's say you want to let the user see their account number, but you don't want to allow them to change an account number.
Yeah, so in the, and I believe, yeah, so list of customers, let's go to my fields here. And so you're right, so customer ID. So one thing you can do is that, you know, obviously you can remove it from your list so they can't see it there, which, you know, may not be able to do it. Plus you can actually initial state thing. So in terms of
Dion, I think your audio has cut out here for a minute. No audio, but I think it should come right back. Does anyone else hear Dion? And it's maybe just not me. Let me take a look at the questions box. Is Dion's audio there?
So I'll go ahead and go
No
into
audio,
here.
no audio, he cut out. Okay, you seem to be back now though, okay.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I'll have to come back on that one too. I mean, again, this is all brand new, so you're right. You want to be able to do that. I did go ahead and go into the fields, customer ID, and oh, here it is, allow edit. Okay,
Right.
so I apologize. This one here for updatable is for your detail view, so leave that be. But you can go here to in-place editing settings and go to allow edit and disable it. So now what will happen is once you've done that, And I know the next question will, can you do that on the fly? But that's where, again, the on-change event and other things like that will allow you to do that. And we'll have to explore that. But I'm going to go ahead and edit this now. And you can see I can edit these other pieces here, but I can't edit ALFKey. So that is your way to do that. And basically just when you're doing when you go to the fields here, go to the field you want, and then go down to the allow edit in the in-place editing properties. And oh, by the way, this is how you do the conditional allow edit is, and I answered my own question here, is that this allows you to specify a JavaScript function to call to determine if the field allows edit. So you can call it a JavaScript function, and if you want, I can give that a try. But basically what it allows you to do is write very sophisticated saying, okay, if this control, like with JavaScript, you can look at other controls, you can look at information and say, if it's this case, then allow them to edit it. Maybe it's a security protocol or something like that. If not, they can't edit it, or vice versa. And so you use this allow edit from a course level just to say whether or not they can edit it. And then the conditional allow edit allows you to do something fancier to say, on the fly, you can determine whether they can edit it or not. Now, you also have the ability to use security groups to determine editing. So much like the grid is that if the person is like a administrator, they can edit that field. If they're not an administrator, and on the fly, the system will do that. And you can also set a default value, much like you can do with a grid on the in-place editing. So all the features you're used to, you're able to do that, and makes life easier there. But this is your answer right there, allow edit plus conditional allow edit.
Excellent. So the next question is, can you allow the user to delete the field that they're on? I see edit, and it's one of the options.
Yes.
Delete one of them.
Yeah, and in that case, you would just use, this has inline editing. What you would do is you could just go ahead and add your own button here, or dynamic image, which I'll just add a button for right now.
Okay.
And then I can add the delete button, then I'll go to my layout, and I'll go ahead and add my delete button in there. Let's put it right here. And then in the delete button, you can then add the on-click event. So if I go back to my field, go here, I can then go to the delete button. I can go to the, where is my on-click event? And in here, you just put in the ability to delete a record. That's a dialog up right here. Then you can use the delete row function to delete that row, and it just works just like a standard list control. So there's no like switch to say add delete to the row, but you can add your own little icon, your own little capabilities to and then you just trigger this on delete event or the delete row event, and then what it will do is it will grab and get that, mark the current row as deleted, and then that will allow you to then, when you synchronize, delete the row, and everything goes from there. So again, the way to implement that is add your own button, and then in the, let me go ahead and copy that, and then I can go right here, and I have to put in the right list control. In that case, it is list customers. And then what happens is when this button is clicked, it would then execute on here to do the delete row functionality. So that's how you could implement your own delete row. And you could, let's go ahead and go here. And again, this is a button right now, but I could, if I want to, make it a dynamic image. Oops, click the wrong button here. So I can make a dynamic image, and I'll call this delete image. And we'll go here, and I'll go to the delete image, go here. Where's my oh, image definition? And if I want to, I can just say 1 = 1 and then pick a image. Let's say I want to probably use an SVG icon. That's the way to go on this as much as possible. It opens up here, and I'll go delete. Here's a good delete. There's usually a minus button, or how about that? That looks like a delete. And so I can put that on there. So now I have this delete button. Let it refresh. And then I can just then add the same code to that button to do that. Oops, it went out on me. So fun with pre-release. Cool. There you go. So bring that. So that's how you can delete by just using the built-in list functionality. Because again, all of this is built on top of the default list functionality, so you don't actually have to do anything different than how you would normally do stuff with a list control. So, and if you're really interested and you want a pre-built delete button for a row, send in a feature request. The way you do that is go to help, send an enhancement request, and it will actually help you write up a little email. It shows all your information about your solution, or not your solution, but your version you're on, and send those in, and we watch them very closely because we want to hear from our developers and understand what they're trying to do with the technology. So.
Excellent. Thanks very much. We only have a couple minutes left, and we have one question that hopefully won't take too long. But in general terms, and this is a deployment question, in general terms, if you're setting up an Alpha Anywhere server, what ports are you going to have to open on that server so that you can publish to the server and also so that people can actually access the server for web requests?
Okay, so I'm going to cover the two variants. So for the standalone server, it's really up to you. So first and foremost, you need to be able to, if you're going to FTP to it, you need to have your FTP port open, which is usually by default done, and it's port 21. You can use any kind of FTP server on the software, so you can either use the built-in FTP on Windows Server, but I've seen other people use other third-party FTP like FileZilla and things like that as FTP on there. So that's to be able to publish to it. Now, for people accessing it, the server, you can pick any port. Now, generically, it's 80 for HTTP, and then 443, you can pick which one for HTTPS, but you're going to need to be able to do two things. One is you need to open that port and define that port is available, but also you need to go into the Alpha server control panel and tell it which port to use to publish out on there. Now, the other element is you're not limited that. You could, if you want to, create, use 1580, which is kind of interesting because most people are scanning port 80s and 443s. Sometimes it gives you a little more security kind of capability there. Now, if you're doing IIS, it's a little different animal. And the reason it's a little different animal is that the way we publish to IIS is not through FTP. So IIS will handle the port in whatever ports IIS is using, 80 or 443. Is it 443 or 433? Anyway, that's the same, no different. But in terms of the port, there is a specific port called the management interface port on IIS, and that port is a different number. I forget the exact 1428 or something like that. It's kind of a strange duck number, but that port needs to be open because what Alpha will do is when you go to publish, it's going to call IIS. It doesn't call FTP. It actually calls the IIS server and says, hey, I want to give you this to install an app on the server, and then IIS does the work on the other side. So it almost acts like an FTP interface for the person there. So again, depending on which version you have, you just need to make sure your FTP is open, and then your ports you're going to expose your app on the standalone. For the IIS, you just got to make sure that management port is open and available, and also then for IIS, which ports people are going to hit to actually consume the application.
Thanks. Now, if I recall, there's another type of publishing option, even with a standalone server, or maybe just with a standalone server, called HTTP publishing. Would that be a case in which you could just have port 80 or port 443 open and not have to use FTP? I believe
that's a great. I have not used that functionality before. The answer is yes, but I haven't gone through it. So
maybe you can show that off in an upcoming webinar.
Yeah.
My understanding is that people have often more success with that than they do with FTP, which sometimes can be a little bit finicky, but the HTTP publishing is a little bit less so. So something maybe we'll take a look at for another session.
Excellent. Absolutely.
Right. Well, we have run out of time. Dion, thank you very much for presenting. Sarah, thank you for being behind the scenes and answering the questions. And I'm sorry I did not introduce you. Dion did at the beginning of the webinar. I think it's the second time in a row I have not done that. I apologize. If you do have any further questions, go ahead and send an email to guides, GUIDES, @alphasoftware.com, and we will be happy to get back to you. Hope to see you all next week at our next Wednesday webinar. Take care and have a great week. Bye-bye.